The morning had started normally enough. Staff Sergeant David Mitchell had taken his position at the East Garden Gate at 0600, the way he had for the past 8 years. The November air was crisp and cold, the kind that made his breath visible in small clouds. Windsor Castle was quiet at this hour, most of the royal family still sleeping, staff moving quietly through the corridors. Just another Tuesday. Mitchell was 34 years old, average height, solid build, the kind of physique that came from years of military training rather than gym vanity. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. More medals than he ever talked about, and for the past 8 years he'd been a Royal Guard. The transition from combat zones to ceremonial duty had been harder than people thought. Standing still required a different kind of discipline than running toward gunfire. But Mitchell had learned something in Afghanistan that served him well here. You watch everything, you notice details, small changes in routine, people moving differently than they should, cars driving faster than normal, because those details, those tiny deviations from normal, those were the warnings that kept people alive. He'd been standing at his post for 6 hours when he saw Princess Charlotte. She was 9 years old, small for her age, with her mother's careful way of moving. She wore her school uniform, navy blue with the school crest, knee-high socks, polished shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she was carrying a folder full of what looked like homework assignments. Mitchell watched her walk the garden path with her lady-in-waiting, Mrs. Henderson, following 3 steps behind. This was routine. Charlotte often used this path to move between the schoolroom wing and the family apartments. Safe, monitored, nothing to worry about. Mitchell's mind went to his own daughter for a moment. Emma was 7, living with his ex-wife in Surrey. He saw her every other weekend. The divorce had been hard but necessary. Military life and marriage didn't always mix well. Emma didn't understand why Daddy couldn't come home more often. Mitchell tried to explain that he was protecting important people, that his job mattered, but 7-year-olds didn't care about duty. They cared about missed bedtimes and empty seats at school plays. He shook the thought away. Focus. Charlotte was about 50 meters away now, walking steadily toward him. Mrs. Henderson was on her phone, talking quietly, probably coordinating something for later. Everything normal, everything fine. Then he heard it. The sound that didn't belong. An engine, revving, getting louder, coming fast. Mitchell's head turned toward the service road that ran parallel to the garden path. That road had a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit. Pedestrians crossed it constantly. Children played near it. Cars were supposed to crawl through that section. Not. The black Bentley came around the corner, doing at least 40 miles per hour. Mitchell's training kicked in immediately. Calculate, assess, act. The car wasn't slowing. Charlotte was on the garden path, yes, but the path curved inward here, came close to the service road. Less than 2 meters between the edge of the path and the road itself. And the Bentley was taking the corner too fast, too wide. Mitchell saw the physics of it in his mind. The car would overcorrect, would mount the curb, would hit the path right where Charlotte was standing. 3 seconds. That's all he had. 3 seconds to process, decide, move. Charlotte hadn't even seen the car yet. She was looking down at her folder, reading something. Mrs. Henderson was still on her phone, facing away. Neither of them knew. Mitchell didn't think, didn't calculate the risk to himself, didn't consider protocol or permission or consequences. 17 years of military training took over. Every drill, every exercise, every moment in combat zones where he'd learned that hesitation killed people. He launched himself forward, covering 12 feet in less than 2 seconds, his boots hitting the gravel path hard. Charlotte looked up, confused by the sudden movement. Mrs. Henderson started to turn. The Bentley's driver saw Mitchell moving and hit the brakes, but it was too late. They were going too fast. The car's momentum was carrying it forward. Mitchell threw his body between the 9-year-old princess and 2 tons of speeding metal. The impact wasn't like in movies. There was no dramatic music, no slow motion, no heroic soundtrack. Just physics, hard, brutal physics. The Bentley's bumper caught Mitchell in the ribs at 41 miles per hour. He'd calculated the angle in that final half second, twisted his body to take the hit on his left side instead of straight on. It was the difference between broken ribs and a broken spine. The force of the impact lifted him off his feet, spinning him sideways. His arms were wrapped around Charlotte, pulling her into his chest, protecting her head with one hand. They hit the gravel path together. Mitchell took the fall on his back, his body absorbing the impact, feeling the small stones tear through his uniform tunic. Sharp pain exploded across his shoulders. His head bounced once against the ground. Not hard enough to cause serious damage, but hard enough to make his vision blur. Charlotte's weight was on top of him. She couldn't have weighed more than 60 pounds. But in that moment, feeling her breathing, feeling her heart racing against his chest, she felt like everything. The Bentley screeched to a stop 15 feet away. The smell of burning rubber filled the air. Mitchell's ears were ringing. That high-pitched whine that came from either the impact or adrenaline or both. His ribs were screaming. Each breath felt like someone was pressing knives into his chest. His back was on fire, where the gravel had torn through cloth and skin. But he could feel Charlotte breathing. Fast, panicked breaths, but breathing. That meant she was alive. That meant he'd gotten there in time. "Princess," he managed, his voice rough. "Princess Charlotte, are you hurt?" She didn't respond, didn't move. Mitchell's training said assess for injuries, check for bleeding, look for signs of trauma. But his body wasn't cooperating. Everything hurt. Moving felt impossible. Then Charlotte gasped. A huge, shaking breath. The kind of breath you take when you've been underwater too long. And she started to cry. Mitchell had heard people cry before. Combat zones. You heard every kind of crying. Fear crying, pain crying, loss crying. But this was different. This was a child who'd just realized she'd almost died. This was pure terror, working its way out through sobs. She pressed her face into his uniform, her small hands gripping the red fabric so tight her knuckles went white. Her whole body was shaking. Not just trembling, full body shakes. The kind that came from shock. "I've got you," Mitchell said quietly, keeping his voice steady despite the pain. "You're safe now. I've got you." Mrs. Henderson was screaming, high-pitched, panicked screaming. Mitchell couldn't see her. His vision was still swimming, but he could hear her running toward them, her shoes clicking rapidly on the stone path. "Oh God! Oh my God, Charlotte! Princess Charlotte!" Mrs. Henderson was crying too, her voice breaking. "Someone call an ambulance! Someone help!" Mitchell forced himself to focus, assess. Charlotte was crying but breathing normally. No obvious injuries, no blood that he could see. She was in shock but physically unharmed. That was good. That was what mattered. His own assessment wasn't as positive. His ribs felt like they were broken. His back was definitely bleeding. He could feel warmth spreading across his skin. His head was pounding, but he'd had worse. Kandahar, 2015, an IED had thrown him 15 feet into a concrete wall. He'd walked away from that. He'd walk away from this. The car's rear door opened, not quickly, not with any sense of urgency, slowly, deliberately, like someone stepping out after arriving at a scheduled appointment. Queen Camilla stepped out of the Bentley. Mitchell had been a royal guard for 8 years. He'd learned to read body language in that time. How people carried themselves told you everything you needed to know. Camilla's body language, right now, wasn't reading as concerned or frightened or guilty. She looked annoyed. She stepped out of the car carefully, adjusting her cream-colored jacket, smoothing her skirt. Her expression was tight, controlled, the kind of face people made when something inconvenient had interrupted their schedule. Mitchell managed to sit up, keeping Charlotte pressed against his chest. The movement sent fresh spikes of pain through his ribs. He ignored it. Charlotte needed to feel safe, and lying on the ground wasn't safe. Sitting up, holding her, that was safer. Mrs. Henderson reached them, dropping to her knees beside Charlotte, her hands fluttering, unsure where to touch or what to do. "Charlotte, darling, are you hurt? Where does it hurt? Talk to me, sweetheart." Charlotte didn't respond to Mrs. Henderson. She stayed pressed against Mitchell, her face buried in his uniform, her crying becoming louder. Not just crying anymore, gasping. Those high-pitched, desperate gasps for air that signaled panic. Mitchell had seen this before. Afghanistan, after a particularly bad firefight. A young soldier, maybe 20 years old, had frozen up after the shooting stopped. Couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. Panic attack, full dissociative break from reality for a few minutes. Charlotte was 9 years old. She'd just almost been killed. And now her body was shutting down, protecting itself the only way it knew how. "Charlotte," Mitchell kept his voice low, calm, steady. The same voice he'd used with that young soldier in Afghanistan. "Charlotte, I need you to look at me. Can you do that?" She didn't move. Her gasps were getting faster, hyperventilating. If she kept this up, she'd pass out. "Charlotte, listen to my voice." Mitchell adjusted his position slightly, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "You're safe now. The car stopped. You're not hurt. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Still nothing. Just those terrible gasping breaths. Mitchell made a decision. He gently took Charlotte's shoulders and pulled her back just enough to see her face. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, tears streaming down her cheeks, her mouth open, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "Look at me," Mitchell said firmly. "Charlotte, look at my eyes." Her gaze found his, just for a moment, but it was enough. "Breathe with me," Mitchell said. "In through your nose." He demonstrated, taking a slow, deep breath despite the pain in his ribs. "Out through your mouth." He exhaled slowly, deliberately. Charlotte tried. The breath hitched halfway, turned into a sob. But she tried. "Again," Mitchell said. "In through your nose. You're safe, Charlotte. You're safe." This time, the breath made it further. Still shaky. Still broken by tears. But better. "That's it. Again. In through your nose. Out through your mouth." 2 other guards had arrived now. Sergeant William Barrett, one of Mitchell's closest friends, was sprinting across the lawn. Corporal James Wright was coming from the main gate, speaking urgently into his radio. Good. Protocol was being followed. Security was being secured. Mitchell could focus on Charlotte. He could also hear someone else approaching. High heels on stone, slow, measured steps. Camilla. Mitchell looked up. She was standing 10 feet away, her arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral. Looking at the scene like she was observing something mildly interesting. Not like she'd just nearly killed a child. "What happened?" Camilla's voice was crisp. Controlled. The kind of voice you used when asking about a minor inconvenience. "Why was she standing in the road?" Mitchell stared at her. He'd been raised to respect royalty, trained to follow protocol, told that you never, ever challenged a member of the royal family. But he'd also been raised with a sense of right and wrong. And this was wrong. Charlotte was still crying against his chest, still struggling to breathe, still trembling. And Camilla was asking why she'd been standing in the road. "Your Majesty," Mitchell said, keeping his voice level, despite the anger building in his chest. "The speed limit on this road is 15 miles per hour. Your car was doing at least 40. Camilla's eyes narrowed. Just slightly. Just enough to show that she didn't appreciate being corrected. "I don't believe I asked for a traffic report, Sergeant." "Your car nearly killed her." The words hung in the air, heavy, accusatory, the kind of words that ended careers. Mitchell didn't care. But before we get into what happened next, make sure you're subscribed to Crown Watch. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss any Royal Guard stories. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. Mitchell's training said assess the situation, check for injuries, secure the area. But his instincts, the ones that came from being a father himself, said hold the child, let her know she's safe. He stayed on the ground, one hand on Charlotte's back, feeling her small body shake with sobs. His ribs screamed with every breath. He ignored it. The car's rear door opened. Queen Camilla stepped out. Not quickly, not with any sign of concern. She moved with the same careful dignity she always showed in public, adjusting her jacket, smoothing her skirt. Mitchell had been a royal guard for 8 years. He'd learned to read body language. And Camilla's body language said she wasn't worried about what had just happened. She was annoyed about the delay. Mitchell got to his feet slowly. His ribs protested. Something might be cracked. Charlotte clung to his uniform, her face buried in the red fabric, her hands gripping tight. She was making a sound, high-pitched, gasping breaths between sobs. He'd heard that sound before, in Afghanistan, when a child had survived a mortar strike on their village. Panic, pure terror, the kind that didn't go away just because the danger had passed. 2 other guards were running toward them now. Mitchell saw Sergeant Barrett sprinting across the lawn and Corporal Wright coming from the main gate. Good men, reliable. They'd help secure the scene. But Mitchell's focus was on Charlotte. She wasn't just crying anymore. She was hyperventilating. Charlotte. He kept his voice low and steady. Not Sergeant Mitchell voice, father voice. Charlotte, I need you to breathe with me. Can you do that? She didn't respond. Her gasps were getting faster. Her face was turning red. Mitchell had seen enough panic attacks to know where this was headed. He knelt down, bringing himself to her level, keeping one hand on her shoulder. In through your nose, out through your mouth, he said quietly. Like this. He demonstrated, exaggerating the breath so she could hear it. You're safe now, I promise. Charlotte's lady-in-waiting arrived, out of breath, her face white. Oh my God, Charlotte. Princess Charlotte, are you hurt? Mitchell held up one hand. She's not injured. She's in shock. Give her space. Camilla walked toward them. Not hurried, not concerned. Just approaching, like she was joining a conversation at a garden party. Mitchell stood up, positioning himself between her and Charlotte. His ribs sent a sharp spike of pain through his chest. He didn't care. What happened? Camilla's voice was crisp. Controlled. Why was she standing in the road? Mitchell stared at her. He'd been raised to respect royalty, trained to follow protocol, told that you never, ever challenged a member of the royal family. But he'd also been raised to call out wrong when he saw it. And this was wrong. Your Majesty, he said, keeping his voice level, the speed limit on this road is 15 miles per hour. You were doing at least 40. Camilla's eyes narrowed. I don't believe I asked for a traffic report, Sergeant. Your car nearly killed her. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone breaks an unspoken rule that everyone thought was unbreakable. Mrs. Henderson froze, her hand halfway to Charlotte's shoulder. Sergeant Barrett, who had just arrived, stopped mid-stride. Corporal Wright's mouth actually fell open slightly. Nobody spoke to royalty like that. Nobody. Camilla's jaw tightened. Her arms, which had been crossed, lowered to her sides. Her hands clenched into fists, then deliberately relaxed. She was controlling her reaction, calculating her response. The princess, Camilla said slowly, each word carefully measured, was standing in an access road. She should not have been there. Mitchell felt Charlotte press harder against his chest. She'd heard that, heard herself being blamed. He could feel her small body tense, could feel her breathing get faster again. She's 9 years old, Mitchell said. His voice was quiet. Not shouting, not aggressive, just stating a fact. She was on the walking path, where she's supposed to be, where she's safe. She's old enough to know to watch for vehicles, and drivers are old enough to know to follow speed limits. Camilla's face changed. Not to guilt or shame, to something colder, more dangerous. You're forgetting yourself, Sergeant. No, Your Majesty. I'm remembering my duty. Mitchell had crossed a line. He knew it. Everyone watching knew it. You didn't argue with royalty. You didn't contradict them. You certainly didn't imply that they were responsible for nearly killing a child. His career was over. He'd be reassigned, maybe discharged. But looking down at Charlotte, still crying, still shaking, still traumatized, he didn't regret it. Sergeant Barrett stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, perhaps we should what? Camilla's voice was sharp now, the careful control slipping. Call the Princess of Wales, so Kate can coddle her daughter some more? So she can turn this into another dramatic scene? Mitchell's hands tightened on Charlotte's shoulders. Not hard, just protective. She's having a panic attack, Your Majesty. She nearly died. She's allowed to be upset. She's being dramatic, just like her mother, making mountains out of molehills. Charlotte made a sound, small, broken. The sound a child makes when they realize an adult doesn't care that they're hurting. Mitchell's military training had taught him control, how to stay calm under fire, how to keep emotions locked down when people were shooting at you. But there were limits to control. There were moments when training failed and human reaction took over. With respect, Your Majesty, Mitchell said, and there was no respect in his tone anymore. She nearly died because your car was speeding through a pedestrian zone. And instead of apologizing, instead of checking if she's hurt, you're blaming a 9-year-old child for standing where she had every right to stand. Camilla's face went red. Not embarrassed. Red. Angry red. I suggest you remember who you're speaking to, Sergeant. I know exactly who I'm speaking to. Mitchell's voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was steel underneath. I'm speaking to someone who ordered her driver to speed, someone whose recklessness nearly killed a child, someone who's now trying to blame that child instead of taking responsibility. The lady in waiting made a sound, half gasp, half squeak. This wasn't how things worked. This wasn't how anyone spoke to royalty. Sergeant Barrett put a hand on Mitchell's shoulder, a warning, but Mitchell didn't acknowledge it. Camilla opened her mouth to respond, but a new voice cut through the tension. What's going on here? Everyone turned. Princess Catherine was walking across the courtyard. Not running, not hurried, but moving with purpose, with that particular intensity she got when something was wrong with her children. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back. She'd clearly been in the middle of something else, but someone had alerted her. Mitchell would later learn that Mrs. Henderson had texted Kate's private secretary the moment the car had hit. One word, emergency. That was all it took. Kate's eyes went to Charlotte first, saw her daughter pressed against a guard's chest, crying, trembling, saw the torn uniform, the blood on the guard's back. Saw the black Bentley stopped awkwardly on the service road, its front wheels over the curb line. Her face didn't change expression. That was somehow worse than if she'd looked angry. Kate's face went absolutely blank. The kind of blank that came before consequences. Charlotte. Kate's voice was soft, calm. Mother voice. Come here, darling. Charlotte lifted her head from Mitchell's chest. Her face was wet with tears, her eyes red and swollen. She saw her mother and made a small sound. Relief and fear and need all mixed together. She scrambled off Mitchell's lap and ran to Kate, who caught her daughter and wrapped her arms around her immediately. Kate held Charlotte for a long moment, one hand on the back of her head, her eyes closed, just holding her, feeling her breathe, making sure she was real and alive and safe. Then she opened her eyes and looked at Mitchell. "Are you hurt, Sergeant?" Mitchell was trying to stand up. It was harder than he expected. His ribs protested every movement. He got halfway up, then Barrett was there, helping him the rest of the way. Mitchell stood, swaying slightly, but upright. "I'm fine, ma'am." Kate's eyes moved to his torn uniform, to the blood seeping through. "You're bleeding." "It's just scrapes, ma'am." Kate held his gaze for a moment. She knew he was understating his injuries, but she also knew he'd done what needed to be done. She gave him a small nod, acknowledgement, gratitude, respect, then turned her attention to Camilla. "What happened?" Kate's voice was still calm, still controlled, but there was an edge underneath, the kind of edge that came when a mother's child had been endangered. Camilla straightened, adjusting her jacket again. "There was an incident, an accident. The car nearly ran over my daughter." Kate's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "I was told your car was doing at least 40 miles per hour in a 15-mile-per-hour zone. Is that correct?" Camilla's mouth tightened. "I was late for... Is that correct?" Kate's voice got quieter. Not louder, quieter. That was worse. Mitchell watched Camilla realize she wasn't getting out of this. Kate wasn't Charles. She didn't care about appearances or protocol or keeping things quiet for the sake of the family's image. When it came to her children, Kate was direct, uncompromising, and right now she wanted answers. "I told the driver to hurry," Camilla said finally. "I had an engagement, the foreign minister's wife. I couldn't be late. I didn't realize..." "You didn't realize that speeding through pedestrian zones might endanger children? Charlotte shouldn't have been standing so close to... She was on the walking path." Kate's voice was still quiet, but it cut through Camilla's excuse like a knife. "Where she's allowed to be, where she should be safe." Charlotte pressed her face harder into her mother's sweater. Kate's hand moved on her daughter's back, that unconscious, comforting gesture every parent knows. Protecting, reassuring. "You're safe now. I've got you." Camilla's face was tight with anger and something else. Fear, maybe. She was realizing how this looked, how it would sound when William heard, when Charles heard, when the palace security reviewed the footage. "I think you're overreacting." Kate's expression didn't change. "Am I? So if I told William that you nearly killed our daughter because you didn't want to be late for tea, you think he'd consider that an overreaction?" Silence. Long and heavy. Camilla's face went through several expressions. Anger, fear, calculation. She was weighing her options, realizing she didn't have many good ones. "It was an accident," Camilla said finally. "Accidents happen. Accidents happen when people follow safety rules, and something goes wrong anyway," Kate said, her voice still, that dangerous quiet. "This wasn't an accident. This was negligence. You ordered your driver to speed through a pedestrian zone. Your car mounted the curb. You nearly killed my daughter." She paused. "And then, instead of apologizing to a traumatized 9-year-old, you blamed her." Mitchell watched Charlotte's shoulders hitch. She was trying not to cry again, trying to be brave for her mother. But Kate felt it and pulled her daughter closer. Mrs. Henderson had been standing frozen this whole time, watching the confrontation like it was a tennis match. Now she spoke up, her voice shaky. "Your Majesty, Princess Charlotte was exactly where she was supposed to be. I was escorting her. The car came around the corner far too fast. If the sergeant hadn't..." She trailed off, couldn't finish the sentence. Kate looked at Mitchell again, really looked at him this time, saw the way he was standing, slightly bent, protecting his ribs, saw the blood staining his uniform, saw the scrapes on his hands where he'd hit the gravel. "You threw yourself in front of the car," Kate said quietly. "I want to be very clear," Kate said. "This isn't about status. This isn't about protocol. This is about my child nearly dying because you were in a hurry. and then being blamed for it. That guard, she gestured to Mitchell, threw himself in front of a speeding car to save her life. He's injured, and you haven't even acknowledged that. Camilla glanced at Mitchell. For the first time, she seemed to actually see him, saw the torn uniform, the blood, the way he was standing slightly bent, protecting his ribs. Her face shifted, not to guilt, but to something close to it. Awareness, maybe, of how this looked, how it would sound when William heard about it. I didn't mean, Camilla started. What you meant doesn't matter, Kate said. What you did matters, what you said matters, and what you're going to do now is leave. Get in your car, have your driver take you back to Clarence House, and stay there until William contacts you. It wasn't a request. Camilla knew it. She looked at Sergeant Barrett, as if he might intervene. He didn't move. Looked at the lady in waiting, who was halfway across the courtyard with Charlotte. Looked at Mitchell. He met her eyes steadily. No sympathy there. No support. This isn't over, Camilla said quietly. You're right, Kate said. It's not. But it's over for today. Camilla turned and walked back to her car. Her driver scrambled to open the door. She got in without another word. The car pulled away slowly this time. Very slowly. Mitchell watched it disappear around the corner. Kate let out a long breath. For the first time, she looked tired, shaken. But she pulled herself together quickly, turning to Mitchell. How badly are you hurt? It's just scrapes, ma'am. Maybe a bruised rib. You're going to see the palace physician. That's an order, not a request. Mitchell nodded. Yes, ma'am. Kate studied him for a moment. Thank you for protecting her. It's my job, ma'am. It's your job to guard the palace. You went beyond that. You could have been killed. Mitchell didn't know what to say to that. She was right. That car could have killed him. If he'd hesitated a second longer, if he'd calculated the risk first, Charlotte would be dead. He'd acted on instinct, did what needed to be done. But hearing Kate say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. She's safe, he said finally. That's what matters. Kate's eyes got bright for a moment. She blinked quickly, cleared her throat. Yes, she is. Because of you. She paused. I won't forget this, Sergeant Mitchell. And neither will she. Kate turned and walked toward the family apartments. Mitchell watched her go, then looked at Sergeant Barrett. You all right? Barrett asked quietly. Been better, been worse. Barrett shook his head. That was the most insane thing I've ever seen you do, and I served with you in Kandahar. She's 9 years old. I know, I'm not criticizing. I'm saying that was... Barrett trailed off, searching for words. That was the right thing, even if it was insane. Corporal Wright joined them. The footage is being pulled now. 3 cameras caught the whole thing. The car definitely went over the curb, definitely was speeding, and the audio picked up everything, Camilla said. Mitchell's ribs were really starting to hurt now. The adrenaline was wearing off. He needed to sit down. But first, there was protocol to follow. I need to file a report. You need to see a doctor, Barrett said. Wright can start the report. I'll pull the footage. You go get checked out. I'm fine. That's an order, Mitchell. From me. And if you don't listen, I'll tell the Princess of Wales that you refused medical attention after being hit by a car. Mitchell almost smiled. Almost. That's playing dirty. That's called knowing when someone's too stubborn for their own good. Go. The palace physician found 2 cracked ribs, severe bruising along his left side, and multiple lacerations on his back, where the gravel had torn through his uniform. She wrapped his ribs, cleaned and dressed the wounds, and told him he was on desk duty for 2 weeks, minimum. I can't be on desk duty, Mitchell said. I'm assigned to perimeter protection. You're assigned to healing, Dr. Roberts said firmly. Doctor's orders. And before you argue, Princess Catherine specifically requested that I ensure you're properly cared for. Are you going to go against a direct request from the Princess of Wales? Mitchell sighed. No, ma'am. Good, because she's already sent word that if you don't follow orders, she'll personally ensure you're reassigned to desk duty for a month instead of 2 weeks. Mitchell couldn't help but smile at that. Kate was nothing if not thorough. Understood. That evening, Mitchell sat in his small apartment in the guard quarters, staring at his laptop. The report was due by midnight. He'd spent 3 hours writing it, going over every detail. The car's speed, the moment of impact, Camilla's words, Charlotte's reaction. Kate's intervention, everything. He read through it one more time, made sure every word was accurate, professional, no emotion, just facts. Then he sent it to Princess Catherine's private secretary, copied to the guard commander and the palace security chief. His phone buzzed, a text from Sergeant Barrett. Footage is uploaded to the secure server. You were right about everything. Car hit 41 meters. Went over curb by at least 6 inches. Audio is crystal clear. Camilla's done. Mitchell set his phone down and closed his eyes. His ribs ached. His back burned where the bandages covered the lacerations. But Charlotte was safe. That was all that mattered. The next morning, Mitchell was at his desk. New assignment, courtesy of Dr. Roberts, when Captain Richard Wells walked in. Wells was the guard commander, former SAS, 23 years of service. He didn't smile often. He wasn't smiling now. Mitchell, walk with me. Mitchell stood carefully, his ribs protesting. He followed Wells out of the office, down the corridor, and into one of the private conference rooms. Wells closed the door. Sit down before you fall down. Mitchell sat. Wells remained standing, hands behind his back. Military posture. I've reviewed your report. I've watched the footage. I've spoken to the driver, to Sergeant Barrett, to the lady in waiting, and to Princess Catherine. Wells paused. I've also received a rather strongly worded complaint from Queen Camilla about your conduct. Mitchell's stomach tightened. Here it comes. He'd known this was possible. You didn't speak to royalty the way he'd spoken to Camilla without consequences. She's demanding you be reprimanded for insubordination, Wells continued. Possibly dismissed from the Royal Guard. Mitchell nodded. I understand, sir. Do you? Because I'm not sure you do. Wells sat down across from him. The Princess of Wales has also weighed in. She's demanding you be commended for exceptional service. Says you saved her daughter's life at significant personal risk. Mitchell blinked. Sir, Prince William reviewed the footage personally. Twice. He wants a full investigation into the incident. Not into you, into Queen Camilla's conduct. He's also blocked Camilla's complaint against you. Says it's without merit given the circumstances. I don't understand. Neither does Camilla, apparently. Wells almost smiled. Almost. She thought she could complain about you and make this go away. Instead, she's drawn more attention to what happened. William's furious, Kate's furious, and King Charles, Wells paused. Let's just say he's disappointed. What happens now? Now, nothing happens to you. You heal. You return to duty when the doctor clears you. And you receive a formal commendation for exceptional conduct in the protection of a member of the royal family. Mitchell sat back carefully. And Camilla? That's above my pay grade, but I can tell you that she's been very quietly informed that her access to the Wales children is restricted, and her driver has been replaced, and there are new speed monitoring systems being installed on all internal palace roads. Wells stood. You did good work, Mitchell. Dangerous work. Stupid work, maybe. But good. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Thank the Princess of Wales. She's the one who went to bat for you. Literally told the palace administration that if anyone tried to discipline you for protecting her daughter, she'd make it very public, very loud, and very embarrassing for everyone involved. Mitchell didn't know what to say to that. Kate had protected him the same way he'd protected Charlotte. There was something fitting about that. Wells headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. Princess Charlotte asked to see you." "Sir?" "When you're feeling up to it. Nothing formal. She just wants to thank you, I think. Kate will arrange it, probably in a few days." After Wells left, Mitchell sat alone in the conference room for a long time. His whole career, he'd been trained to follow protocol, to respect hierarchy, to never question royal authority. And in one moment, he'd thrown all of that away because a child was in danger. He'd expected consequences, expected punishment. Instead, he was being commended, protected, thanked. 3 days later, Mitchell was summoned to the family apartments. He'd never been there before. Guards didn't usually go into the private areas unless there was a security threat. He was nervous. His ribs still hurt, wrapped tight under his uniform. Princess Catherine met him at the door. "Thank you for coming, Sergeant. Charlotte's been asking about you every day." "How is she, ma'am?" "Better, still having nightmares." "But better." Kate led him into a sitting room. It was comfortable, normal, not the formal rooms Mitchell had seen in photos. This was where the family actually lived. Charlotte was sitting on a couch, a book in her lap. She looked up when he entered. Her face was still a bit pale. Her eyes were tired, but she smiled when she saw him. "Hello," she said quietly. "Hello, Princess Charlotte. You can call me Charlotte, if you want." Mitchell glanced at Kate, who nodded slightly. "All right, Charlotte." Charlotte put her book down and stood up. She was small, 9 years old, still just a child, but there was something different about her now. Something older in her eyes. "I wanted to say thank you," Charlotte said, "for saving me. Mummy said you got hurt." "I'm all right. How are you feeling?" "Scared sometimes, but Mummy said that's okay, that it's normal to be scared after something scary happens." "Your mum's right. It's very normal." Charlotte looked at her mother, then back at Mitchell. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you scared? When the car was coming?" Mitchell thought about that, thought about telling her a comfortable lie, that guards aren't scared, that training takes over. But she'd asked him a real question. She deserved a real answer. "Yes," he said. "I was scared." Charlotte's eyes widened slightly. "Really? Really? I saw the car. I saw you, and I was terrified that I wouldn't get there in time." "But you did." "Yes, I did." Charlotte moved forward suddenly and hugged him. Mitchell froze, not sure what protocol said about this. Kate smiled and nodded. It was okay. He gently put one hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "Thank you," Charlotte whispered, "for being brave even though you were scared." Mitchell's chest tightened. Not from the ribs, from something else. "You're welcome." Charlotte pulled back and looked up at him. "Will you still be my guard, even though you're hurt?" "I'll always be your guard, Charlotte. When I'm healed, I'll go back to my regular post, but I'll always be watching out for you." "Good." Charlotte stepped back, looking suddenly shy. "Mummy says you got in trouble for yelling at Camilla." "Charlotte," Kate said gently, "but it's true, and I don't think you should be in trouble. She was being mean. You were right." Mitchell looked at Kate helplessly. She gave him a small smile. "I'm not in trouble, Charlotte. Everything worked out fine." "Good." Charlotte sat back down on the couch. "Because if they tried to punish you, I would have told Daddy, and he would have fixed it." "Charlotte has become very protective of you," Kate said quietly. "She tells everyone at school that a guard saved her life." "I was just doing my job." "Mom." "You went beyond your job, and we won't forget it." Later that evening, Mitchell stood at his window in the guard quarters, looking out over the palace grounds. Somewhere out there, Charlotte was safe, probably having dinner with her family, probably still a bit scared, but healing. That's all he'd wanted, for her to be safe. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. He opened it. "Thank you for protecting our daughter. You showed what real courage looks like. We're in your debt." William and Catherine. Mitchell stared at the message for a long time. Then he saved it, put his phone away, and returned to looking out the window, watching over the palace where a 9-year-old girl was safe, because he'd made the right choice at the right moment. 2 weeks later, Mitchell returned to active duty. His ribs had healed. The lacerations had scarred over. He stood at his post near the East Garden gate, the same place he'd been when Camilla's car came around that corner. New speed monitors were installed now, new warning signs, new protocols about vehicle speeds in pedestrian zones. Changes that should have been there all along. Changes that came because one guard chose to speak up instead of staying silent. Charlotte walked past him that afternoon with her lady-in-waiting. She saw him and smiled. Just a small smile. Then she kept walking. No fuss, no drama, just acknowledgement. He was there. He was watching. She was safe. That was enough. Mitchell thought about that moment often in the weeks that followed. The 3 seconds between seeing the car and making the decision to act. 3 seconds to calculate risk. 3 seconds to weigh protocol against instinct. 3 seconds to choose between his safety and a child's life. He'd made that choice without conscious thought. Training had taken over. But looking back, he realized something important. Training could teach you how to move, how to react, how to assess threats. But training couldn't teach you why to move. That came from something deeper, from the understanding that some things were worth any cost. Royal guards stand watch at palace gates for 8 hours at a time. They stand perfectly still in all weather. They maintain discipline and composure, no matter what tourists do or say. People think that's what makes a guard. The ability to stand still, to look impressive, to be part of the pageantry. But that's not what makes a guard, not really. What makes a guard is the moment when standing still becomes impossible, when protocol gives way to conscience, when the choice comes down to safety or courage, and you choose courage every single time. Mitchell had been trained by some of the best soldiers in the British military. He'd served in combat zones where split-second decisions meant life or death. He'd earned medals for bravery under fire, but none of that compared to the 3 seconds when he'd seen Princess Charlotte in danger and known, without question, what he had to do. The military teaches you to follow orders. The Royal Guard teaches you protocol and tradition. But real courage? That comes from knowing when to break the rules, when to speak up, when to put everything on the line because someone needs protecting and you're the only one there to do it. Camilla had nearly killed a child. Not intentionally, perhaps, but through negligence, through the arrogance of thinking that her schedule, her convenience, her importance mattered more than a 9-year-old's safety. And when confronted with what she'd done, her first instinct hadn't been apology. It had been blame. That told Mitchell everything he needed to know about character. Real character shows itself in crisis, when things go wrong, when there's no time to prepare or calculate the right response. You either do the right thing or you don't. Charlotte had learned something that day too. She'd learned that when she needed help, someone would be there, that not all adults would let her down. That courage sometimes wore a red uniform and stood between children and danger without hesitation. That lesson, the lesson that people would protect her, that she could trust certain adults to do the right thing, that was worth every broken rib, every scrape, every moment of pain Mitchell had endured. Royal Guards aren't just ceremonial. They're the last line of defense when protocol fails and danger comes speeding around corners. They're the ones who make split-second decisions that save lives. Who speak truth when everyone else stays silent. Who put themselves between children and harm, no matter the cost. Staff Sergeant David Mitchell stood at his post that day because he understood something simple. Rank doesn't matter, status doesn't matter. When a child is in danger, you act, you protect, you do what's right. And sometimes, doing what's right means standing up to a queen, means speaking truth to power, means accepting that your courage might cost you everything, but doing it anyway. Because the alternative, letting that child get hurt, is unacceptable. Mitchell had learned something else that day too. He'd learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite fear. He'd been terrified when that car came around the corner, terrified that he wouldn't be fast enough, that he'd fail, that Charlotte would be hurt or killed. But he'd moved anyway, and that's what courage looks like in real life. Not the absence of fear, not the confidence that everything will work out. Just the decision to act when action is needed, consequences be damned. If this story showed you something about royal guards you didn't know before, hit that subscribe button. We share these stories every day at the same time, showing you what really happens behind palace walls, the moments that don't make the newspapers, the choices that don't get headlines, the courage that wears a red uniform and stands watch. Tomorrow, we'll tell you about the time Princess Anne confronted Camilla over stolen royal jewellery, a Victorian diamond bracelet that belonged to Queen Elizabeth. You won't believe what Anne said when she found it in Camilla's personal collection. Drop a comment and let us know. Was Sergeant Mitchell right to speak to Camilla the way he did? Should there be criminal charges for endangering a child? We read every single comment and we love hearing from you. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another story about the people who protect the royal family. The ones who wear red, the ones who stand watch, the ones who understand that sometimes courage looks like throwing yourself in front of a speeding car, and sometimes it looks like standing up to a queen and telling her the truth she doesn't want to hear. Both take the same kind of strength, and both matter equally.